Welcome back. This is puff pastry part 2. Today I'm going to show you how to prepare some classic puff pastries, both sweet and savory, using the dough that I prepared in the last segment. Okay, so it's been chilled 24 hours, and I'm going to take it out and I'm going to begin to roll it out. I need to roll it out to about 1/4 of an inch. Before I go ahead and start with that, I did want to point out one thing. Making puff pastry takes many hours, and you can tell from the previous video how many times I've had to take the dough out of the refrigerator, roll it, fold it and turn it again, and put it back in to chill it. A lot of people don't have that kind of time. Making fresh puff pastry tends to be really more about people who are working in the industry, and professional bakers and pastry chefs. So for at-home use, and I frequently use this as well, is a convenience product. Pepperidge Farm sells it, and there's a few other brands. I think even Walmart brand has some as well. There are 2 sheets in here, and they come frozen, and basically all you have to do is defrost them and lay them out and cut them into the shapes and sizes that you like, and it's a beautiful product. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, but we're gonna use the good stuff. And honestly, if you've ever tasted anything, scratch-made, homemade, always tastes better than the bought kind. So we're gonna go with the piece that we have. I wanna roll it out in 2 sections. I'm gonna use my dough cutter here to cut a piece in half. I'm gonna set the other piece aside until I'm ready for it. Lightly dust your work surface and lightly dust the puff pastry. It's really quite hard to see it in video, but there's just so many layers upon layers upon layers in the puff pastry from having rolled it out, folded it, and turned it 6 different times. All right, and I'm just gonna kind of manipulate it and press it a little bit with my hands just to kind of get it started. It's going to take a little bit of putting your back into it to get this rolled out. So don't think that it's just going to be so gentle and easy. It's cold, and it has cold butter in it, so it does require a little bit of finesse and a little bit of elbow grease. And you can see it's even moving around on me a bit. I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but when you look at it, you'll be able to see streaks and flecks of butter throughout the pastry, and being able to see that is important. Ultimately, what makes puff pastry rise in the oven is going to be heat applied, creating steam, and that steam is going to push the puff pastry up and make it nice and tall. It should increase 6 times its size. So if I'm rolling it out to 1/4 of an inch, we should theoretically have 1.5 inches by the time we're done. All right, and I'm using my ruler. I'm going to want 4-inch squares. So I want to go longer, but not any wider than this. Scrap dough can be used for things, but that requires a little bit more work, and so I'm going to try to keep my scraps down to a minimum. And remember, it's not something that you can roll it out and then take a phone call and the dough's sitting out and getting warm. You need to use it right away. You want to be using it while it's cold. Alrighty, I'm going to cut this into several 4x4 squares. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to kind of neaten this up a little bit so that I'm getting a straight edge. And I want to do 4 inches. I'm just going along. It's not going to be exact. Don't make yourself crazy thinking it's got to be absolutely perfect. Nothing is perfect. And then on this side, I've got to take a little piece off. I always say when operating a wheel, don't look where you've been, look where you're going, and you'll get a straight line. All right, setting my scraps aside. And then we need to do 4 inches this way. 4 inches, 4 inches, and another 4 inches. All right, all these pastries that I'm gonna make today all start out the same way with a 4-inch square, okay? You can make them smaller, you can make them larger, but they have to be square. So it has to be dimensions that are square. All right, so I'm gonna start with the simplest altogether, which is called squares. You can't get much easier than that. So we're actually going to lay down on the sheet pan 2 squares, because I'm gonna do a variety, all right? So I have quite a little collection of things here that I'm gonna use for fillings and toppings. I have a mixture of spinach and shredded Swiss cheese. I have some cheddar cheese and some bacon, some blueberries, some Granny Smith apple, a few squares of Hershey's chocolate, some pastry cream, which is like a vanilla pudding, and some raspberry jam. You can use seedless or with seeds. I prefer seedless. Okay, so for the first one, I'm going to make, and with all of these, I'm gonna make a sweet version and a savory version. So a sweet version being things we expect to eat as a dessert. Savory, those things we expect to eat as like an appetizer or as an accompaniment to our meal. Right? All I'm gonna do, I've got a little bit of Granny Smith apple, and I've made super thin slices of it, and I'm simply gonna shingle the apple across the top. When I say shingle, I'm gonna be overlapping and laying them down across the top of the puff pastry. Right? And then on the other one, I'm gonna add a little bit of this cheese and spinach filling. Now all I did was I sauteed a little bit of fresh spinach with a little bit of olive oil. I added a little bit of kosher salt, cracked black pepper, a little bit of red pepper flakes to give it a zip, and then just tossed in some shredded Swiss cheese with that. All right. So the next one that I'm gonna do are called turnovers. I'm gonna do turnovers 2 different ways. Turnovers, the traditional triangular shape, and one where I cross it so that you can see the fillings inside. So I'm gonna place 2 more squares down on the baking sheet. And this time I wanna go over them both with a little bit of egg wash. This is simply 1 egg scrambled with about a tablespoon of water in it. And this is gonna help them to stick together when I have to fold them. All right, so into one, I'm gonna put a slice of cheddar cheese, just across there, and a piece of bacon. And then I'm simply gonna bring 1 point over and bring the other point over and pinch it at the seam, okay? So there's my savory turnover. I'm gonna do a traditional turnover for the other one. I'm gonna do it in raspberry. I absolutely love raspberry pastries. Just a little bit of jam in there. You don't wanna overdo it because it's just gonna squeeze out. And then turn it over onto itself, all right, and press it down. All right. And you can even go back over and do a little bit of a pinch, little crimp it together with the fork. Gives it just a little bit more of a rustic look and helps to hold it together a little bit better. And next I'm gonna do diamonds. Diamonds are a little bit different. You have to prepare them first before you put them on the pan. And what you do is you fold them into a triangle, and then you take your either a knife, and you can use any kind of knife. I'm gonna use my dough cutter, and I'm gonna cut little grooves. Right. Don't go all the way through, leave it connected at the tip. I'm gonna then open them back up, and you can see I've made a cut in there, okay? I'm gonna bring them over to my baking sheet. Right. And I'm gonna crisscross them. I'm gonna first hit them with a little bit of egg wash so that they'll stick together, and also so they're gonna get that nice shiny brown color when they're baked. Now one of them I'm gonna leave completely plain and empty, and I'm gonna show you what I do with that after it comes out of the oven. And the other one, look, I cross one side over, cross the other side over, and you can see I've got that little diamond shape to it, okay? And doing the other one, super simple. It makes like a little cavity in the center. One, I'm going to leave it plain. When it comes out, I'll poke a hole down there, put pastry cream inside, and put a berry on top, and it'll be dusted with powdered sugar as a dessert. The other one I'm gonna do savory, and I'm gonna add a little bit more of that spinach and cheese filling. And it's gonna bake up around it. You know what I always say, don't be too stingy, don't be stingy. Put just enough in, but don't overdo it too, okay? And finally, I just wanna go back over a little bit some of these with a little bit more egg wash to make sure I'm gonna get that nice shiny golden color that I like. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the oven at 425 degrees. They're going to take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how much filling you've put in the center. So it will vary. Okay, so while the first pastries are baking, I wanna show you how to make the fourth and final one that I'm going to show you today. Now, don't be under the impression that those are the only things that can be made with puff pastry. The sky's the limit. There are so many, I couldn't possibly show them all to you today. So I'm just gonna focus on these few that start with a simple square. This one is also gonna be start with a 4 by 4 inch square, and I call these puffs. I'm gonna do the same thing, pressing down the dough to try to manipulate it and get it started a little bit by hand. And then I'm gonna roll it. All right, so my last pastry item to demonstrate to you, I call these puffs. And these are pretty easy too. Simply gonna take a little bit more egg wash the top of the puff pastry. And in one, I'm gonna make it chocolate. A little bit of, looks like I got about 3 squares. Maybe I'll go with one more little square in there. Right, and I'm just gonna bring the corners together, right? Pinch them together a little bit, and then bring the other side together and pinch it. It's like a little bundle, right? And I'm gonna do the same thing. I have a little bit of that cheese and spinach. In terms of savory, there's no limit to the amount of things you can put in there for hors d'oeuvres. Mushrooms diced up, or sun-dried tomato, olive tapenade, a little bit of seafood in there. Really anything that really floats your boat. And again, I'm being stingy. I don't want to be too stingy. I'll put a little bit more in there. Don't be stingy. And again, bringing the points together, pinching, and then bringing the other two and pinching. Okay, and then these little guys are going to get egg washed again, so that they're gonna get nice and shiny and browned in the oven. So I'm also gonna bake these out at 425 degrees for about 12 minutes until they're golden brown. All of my puff pastry items have come out of the oven and have cooled, so I just wanna finish them off. In some cases, they're just gonna be left plain, as is with the savory items. And then with the sweet ones, I'm gonna do a little bit of decoration just to, you know, pretty them up, because appearance is everything. All right, so I'm gonna start by actually moving my savory ones all to this other tray. Here was my puff. That one had the spinach and Swiss cheese. And then I did a square with the same filling. I also did a diamond with that same filling. And then finally, I did a turnover style that was open face that had cheddar cheese and bacon in it. I just wanted to point out, I forgot to mention earlier, you want to be sure that whatever meat you're using inside of these, that it's pre-cooked prior to putting it together, because it's just not going to have enough time to cook in the oven. So like par cooked at least is important, or you're going to have like fatty bacon. Right. So I have my puff here. This one was filled with pieces of the Hershey's chocolate. I have my apple square that has the Granny Smith apple fanned out. I have the plain raspberry turnover. And then finally, I have my little diamond that I made that I'm going to decorate post baking, as opposed to the spinach one that I did that I put it in before it baked. So I'm going to put it aside on the plate. And you can see it's got a little bit of a cavity in there. It's not real big, but it's gonna be enough for us to put a little bit of this pastry cream in there. I'm just gonna kind of push down the center in there and just put a little dollop of the cream on top. All right. I have a few blueberries here and a strawberry. So I'm gonna put half a strawberry down. And I like to leave the green because I think that that just adds a little something to the color. Put that on top. Add a couple of the blueberries. Just to make it look pretty. Hit it with a little bit of powdered sugar. And I have a few other items here. The choice is really yours. I didn't have any apricot jam. I think that the apple squares look great if you thin out a little bit of apricot jam and brush it on. It gives it a nice shine to it. But since I didn't have that, I'm just gonna go ahead and add powdered sugar to that one and powdered sugar to the chocolate puff. You could also streak this with melted chocolate if you would like. And then I'm going to put some water icing on the raspberry turnover. Basically what water icing is, if you've ever thinned down powdered sugar with either water, milk, lemon juice, those types of things, that's all glaze or water icing. So I'm just going to put a little bit on here and just drag it across to give it that traditional look. Right. And then it'll just dry on its own. Okay. So there you have it, both sweet and savory baked goods made from fresh puff pastry. Thank you.